What's up guys, Tommy with Studio Sense here. I'm really glad that you're stopping by to check out today's first impressions. This one was actually released earlier this year. I'm just now getting my hands on it, and guys, I'm super excited about this one because this is from a very solid line that began way back in 2014 or so, and this is the latest release or latest edition in the Guerlain L'Homme Ideal line. It's L'Homme Ideal Parfum. So far the highest concentration of this line, so if you're into that whole cherry almond kind of DNA, you're gonna really like this. I've got that and more coming up, so stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. Today, as I've said, is my first impressions of a relatively new release by Guerlain. It is L'Homme Ideal Parfum. Now, we're going to do this one pretty quickly so we can get you guys on your way. I like to do my first impressions pretty quick. Don't want to beleaguer the point because this isn't a full review where I go into detail about the performance, more laser focus on the notes and everything regarding the performance. So let's jump into this and take a quick look at the presentation. You can't really tell anything by the box. It's just a dark taupe or gray. On the front in silver lettering, it says L'Homme Ideal de Guerlain, Paris. Below that, Parfum, and it is 3.3 fluid ounces or 100 ml. On the top of the box is embossed the elegant Guerlain logo. The sides of the box have no information. The back of the box says Guerlain Paris with the ingredients and some additional information. Now on the bottom of the box, there's a UPC, a QR code, some additional address information, and a couple of stickers. There is a batch code of 4J01. L'Homme Ideal Les Parfums bottle takes on a bolder look with a darker gray label that reflects the power and concentration of the fragrance. With a nod to the world of watchmaking, the heavy matte cap features a guilloche pattern. The top of the lid also has the Guerlain logo. On the bottom of the bottle is an adhesive sticker with that batch code, size, concentration, and house. So there you have it, guys. Since the early 2000s, Guerlain hasn't really changed a lot about their bottle, maybe a little bit about the label in terms of color and in terms of the look. They've streamlined it a little bit, made it look a little bit more modern, but otherwise pretty much the same, kind of abiding by that whole if it's not broken, don't fix it ideology, and I happen to agree. I really like the way that it looks, and I like the way that it feels in the hand, and especially when you pull off that lid, and by the way, the lid does click into place and it's a very strong connection. The atomizer is very well made. It is a silver with a black aperture, makes it easy to see, and on the top of the atomizer pump is the Guerlain logo. I'm going to show you a spray. This sprays a decent amount out of the pump. I'm not going to spray too much on my desk because this is a Parfum concentration. It's pretty powerful and it will fill a room. But I absolutely love how this fragrance smells. Now, if we go back in time to the original EDT, that came out in, I believe, 2014. And that was when the first combination of almond, cherry, and tobacco became relatively popular. Now, L'Homme Ideal wasn't originally an EDT. Later on in 2016 is when L'Homme Ideal, the EDP, came out. And this was a combination of not only Terry Wasser, which is the original creator of the fragrance. It was Terry Wasser and Delphine Jelk. And then L'Homme Ideal Extreme came out in 2020, even further enhancing the whole kind of cherry almond tobacco DNA and aroma, and that was just Terry Wasser. And now we've skipped over to 2024, and it's just Delphine Jelk as the perfumer. This is an absolutely fantastic Boozy Gourmand fragrance. I'm gonna just say that up front. Now, there are some facets of this fragrance that some people might not like as much, and I'm gonna kind of tell you what the difference is between the EDP and this one. The EDP and Extreme are very similar, so I'm gonna talk about them as if they're the same, basically, in terms of how they smell, in reference to the Parfum edition. Now, what about the notes? Now that we know what it looks like, what about the notes that are in the Parfum edition? Well, they're not telling us every single note that's in this fragrance, but they are giving us the highlights. The highlights are amaretto, know, amaretto is a almond liqueur, basically, like Di Serrano makes probably the most popular one. So that's an almond liqueur. There's amaretto. And even though they don't list it as a note, there's definitely a cherry presence in this fragrance. It wouldn't be L'Homme Ideal without cherry in combination with the almond and the amaretto, but it's a more boozy side. And then we've got leather, we've got musky notes, and then we've got a patchouli. Those are the only notes that are listed in the fragrance. Now, in the previous versions, L'Homme Ideal EDP, and Extreme, there's also like pink pepper, bergamot, tobacco, heliotrope, cinnamon, and other various notes. I'm not going to try to pick those out and definitively tell you what I think is in this fragrance. We're going to talk about what's listed and what the fragrance overall smells like, because I want you to be able to base whether you want to buy the fragrance or not on this video. That's kind of the information that we're going for in this video, just to tell you straight up, just like all my first impressions, though I'm not going to go into as much detail. This definitely opens with an almond cherry, just very similar to the EDP and the Extreme. You can tell they're related straight out of the atomizer in the open. In the open, there is this kind of heady mix of a boozy, cherry, almonds. You've got the amaretto and the cherry. That's pretty much what you're getting straight away, and pretty heavily, but it's not like a freshly picked cherry. It's not like an aquatic, fresh, wet, or soapy, or even really high citrus kind of cherry. It's more like a darker, pulpy kind of cherry, not like a fresh, bright maraschino kind of cherry, but it is a sweet, pulpy cherry. Okay, so imagine that, just your amaretto, your boozy, your almond, and your cherry straight out the gate. It's most similar to the others in the line in the open, and then as the fragrance begins drying down, which is about 15 or 20 minutes after you sprayed it on your skin or a litmus strip, is when it starts deviating the most, and it starts picking up and doing its own, carrying its own mantle. The sweetness comes across right away in this fragrance. It is a sweet fragrance. However, the combination of leather in this fragrance really kind of reduces that sweetness. I don't want to say that it kills the sweetness altogether, but it does cut it in pretty much half. That's good news for many out there who don't really like sweet gourmand fragrances. This isn't a super sweet, sticky, tacky gourmand fragrance. It is, I would say, medium to light in terms of the sweetness, specifically later on in the dry down. Later on in the dry down, it becomes much more resinous, much more ambery, and what you pick up on the most, the cherry starts kind of going away, and then you pick up this very rich, very wonderful smelling leather. It's the kind of leather that you smell when let's say you purchase a leather sofa and you sit down on it, and the air from the cushions pushes up, and you get that fresh leather smell straight into your nose, and it's just a very heady. It itself is almost lightly boozy leather, and boozy amaretto makes this a boozy wonder. That's pretty much definitively what you're getting, is a very boozy fragrance. And that's good news for those of you out there that like boozy fragrances. This is probably the most boozy iteration of L'Homme Ideal out there, specifically in the dry down. You get it straight away in the open, but the sweetness of that liqueur turns more into a kind of like a brandy cognac. There's also this tinge of green that is just on the precipice of being like a vegetal or like an herbal or medicinal, but it doesn't quite go into that territory, which is good news. It just stays within the realm of spicy. The patchouli gives it this grounded, earthy, spicy to go along with this cherry almond leather trio that is the mainstay of L'Homme Ideal Parfum, which is where you want this fragrance to stay. You don't really want it to change too much from what you're getting in the open to the mid. So where it finally ends up is kind of like a Tom Ford ombre, like if you found an old book that was bound with a very high grade leather, brought it up to your nose and took a deep whiff. That's the kind of leather you're getting in L'Homme Ideal Parfum. Really high grade, high quality, in combination with that finely tuned amaretto, almond, just a hint of that cherry. But there isn't a lot of cherry in the dry down of this, and that may be bad news to some who really like how the cherry and almond carry on in the EDP and in the Extreme. So it isn't as cherry-esque towards the dry down as it is in the open, and just a bit more in the mid. So without going into too much complexity, because it's not really a complex fragrance overall, it's a fairly linear fragrance. What you smell is what you get. It's not going to be supremely changeable, but it is the most changeable from the open to the dry down. If you really like the cherry almond combination, the properties of the open, then you'll really enjoy the EDP, because that's pretty much what you get, is just more of that. But if you like the boozy, kind of the amaretto, amber, leathery leathery combination, then you're going to really enjoy the dry down of L'Homme Ideal Parfum. It is definitely a sweater weather fragrance. It is the perfect transitional or autumnal kind of fragrance on into winter. This is going to be a fantastic winter cold weather wear. It's going to be one of those you spray on pulse points, going to be one of those that you want to layer up with. You can even layer with any of the other L'Homme Ideal fragrances. Use the EDP in conjunction with the Parfum or the Extreme. A couple of detractors of this fragrance: it's not quite as tobacco and cherry as the original, the EDP and the Extremes. The leather patchouli combination does take the place of tobacco, and there may even be a tobacco note in this, but it's a very light. Primarily what you're getting is that leather amaretto. That can be a detractor to some who really enjoy the tobacco note. Also, the price is just, I don't know what it is about Guerlain. I guess I definitely understand that they want to be a top shelf designer or brand, and they are. And definitely the price reflects that. For a 100 ml bottle, it is $175 on their website and at other retailers. And as a brand new fragrance for a Parfum concentration, you would think that it's typical. It's still a little bit high in my book. And especially since it's not doing anything that much different. When I say that much different, I mean dramatically different, like going in a completely different direction. It's very similar to the EDP and the Extreme. You can get those for relatively inexpensively right now, and this one's been out for a while. I think it came out in March, April. It's historically always a while before Guerlain reduces the price or allows the discounter to reduce the price of their fragrance. And that's probably going to be the case for L'Homme Ideal Parfum. Now, recently I talked about in a video the most popular new releases of 2024, and this one rated very high on Fragrantica, Parfumo, and pretty much any website that you can go to. People are giving this a really high score, and it's well deserved. But again, there are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind before you purchase it, and that is the price. It's very expensive. You might want to wait. It's at discounters now, but it's still at the pretty much the retail price, not quite as reduced as time will allow. So wait a little bit more for it to be reduced. And if you're wanting more of the same, more of L'Homme Ideal EDP and the Extreme, and you really love that tobacco note and want it to endure, then you may want to think about trying a sample of this first, because it is not quite as tobacco rich as the other fragrances are. Although it is ambery, it's resinous, it's very much that whole almond cherry, but it's erring more on the side of more leather-esque, especially in the dry down. So those are some things to keep in mind when you're thinking about maybe buying the fragrance, when you're considering purchasing it. Overall, a fantastic fall fragrance, a fantastic transitional fragrance from warmer to weather to cooler weather. Now, in terms of longevity, I don't get too much into longevity in first impressions. I will tell you that it is admirable, specifically in a Parfum edition. The longevity is not going to be an issue with this. But what you're getting in that length and that period of time is less like the EDP and less like the Extreme, and more doing its own boozy amaretto leather kind of thing. Having said that, it's worth owning each iteration of this fragrance, because each of them do their kind of their own thing, even as they're very similar and fit within the wheelhouse of that whole almond cherry sweet gourmand. Well, guys, that's it for my first impressions of L'Homme Ideal Parfum. I think it is a fantastic fragrance. It is very expensive, and I'm not going to say it's not worth it, but for those of you that are a little bit tight, specifically because of the holidays and other reasons, you might want to just put it on the back burner or get yourself a sample and try it out and figure out whether it's something you want to spend almost $200. Again, it's $175 for a 100 ml bottle directly from their website, and I'll list any big discounters below if I've found it at a more discounted rate for you. So check out the links below for that. But if you've already tried it, let everyone know what you think of the fragrance. What are some benefits, some pros and cons? Please list those down below. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. As always, thank you so much for your continued support on my channel. There's a lot of goings on out there in that big world, so please be safe, you and your family, during the holidays. I'm Tommy with Studio Sense, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video review.